So thanks for being here and joining me for the workshop for creating powerful blurbs and characters. Let me share this with you. Okay, so just raise your hand really quick so I can make sure that those raise hand signs are working. Awesome. Yay, thanks everybody. All right. Also, I just wanted to say a quick cheers to everybody here. I know you're working on something, and cheers to you. I have a little chamomile tea, depending on how this goes, and some matcha. And then if I make a complete muck, you know, that at the end. So cheers to you. All right, really quick, let me just go over some of the giveaways that I will be providing for this. One VIP winner will receive the blurb formula I give to all my clients and the character profile sheets that are part of my upcoming character course. And then one regular ticket holder winner will receive my mini self-editing masterclass. Melissa will send me the winner's emails, and then I will send those out to you. And then during this workshop, I'll tell you how all of you joining me today will receive something special at the end. So just really quick, I won't make it long because I hate talking about myself. I'm sure you all hate writing your about me page. As writers, we have lots to say, but we hate talking about ourselves. But I am Amanda. Nice to meet you. And I write under the pen name A.R. Garrett. And basically, as a writer, I excavate facts, dissect mythology, and I write about ancient warrior women that are kind of lost in the shadows of our history books, with, of course, a touch of fantasy for the daydreamer in all of us. And if you are a fantasy writer, please raise your hand. I'd love to see who is. Yeah, that's what I figured. Most of you. And what about any historical fantasy writers? Oh, okay. Well, if you need a critique partner, I'm looking for one more. So if you need one, then we can link up. So professionally, I have spent the last 5 years as a freelance fiction editor, building a platform to help women writers succeed. I have a business degree, an English degree, minoring in history, and currently pursuing my MFA in creative writing. But more recently, I've changed my editing, what I specialize now. Instead of full manuscripts, is I do blurbs, query letters, and first chapters. And I've created something called flash edits. So basically, it's just, it helps you get for a small amount of money and a small amount of time, you get the most bang for your buck. And it's everything to hook a reader with your blurb, your query letter, your first chapter, and then that can help you for all your future chapters and your future stories. So what I do is I record them, take you step by step, and then I give you formulas so that you can kind of succeed from there. Okay, has anybody worked with an editor? I'd love to know. Raise your hand. Sorry, I'm all about this raise hand button. I'll stop, I promise. All right, let's get started. So the basics. Blurb basics. Create a powerful opener. I say this even in your first chapter, query letter, whatever you're doing, make your first line the most important. Make it short. Honestly, up to 150 words. Remember, we live in a day of TikTok and short attention spans, so just keep it sweet. And then next, introduce the main character and your world, but not too much backstory, obviously, because it's just your blurb. You want to introduce the conflict, and also don't forget to establish stakes. I feel like this is something that I see a lot with my clients, is that they've introduced a lot of conflict, the characters, it sounds really intriguing, but if it doesn't have the stakes involved, then it's not that hook of like, oh my God, I need to know what's going to happen. So let's take an example from one of my favorite books, The Last Kingdom, and you've maybe seen it on Netflix. It's a series now. So if you know Uhtred, by just saying Uhtred must save the King of England, that sounds actually really intriguing and interesting, but you got to have the stakes. What needs to be involved? And it's not as impactful unless we know what that stake is. So let's say something like, his failure will result in the crumble of Christianity as the pagan Danes take over the last kingdom of England. So that's a little more intriguing. Okay, next, don't forget to add a relatable theme and set the mood for your genre. This is like a mini glimpse into what kind of atmosphere they're going to be involved in your story. I mean, you could say that there is vampires and everything else involved, but if it's very happy and bubblegummy, that's probably going to be the theme throughout your story. So it needs to match your story and it needs to match your genre. And it is a preview to your audience. So if it's got some grit, you're going to want to put a little grit into your blurb too. So keywords for Amazon. This is tricky, especially for everyone that's experienced it out there. So Amazon only displays the first few lines of your product description. So it is essential to have that hook in the beginning. And then Amazon also, unfortunately, they have an algorithm. Who hates algorithms around here? So yeah, unfortunately they do. So to avoid spammy first liners, you need to avoid kind of cliche things like a thrilling adventure with a twist ending, a killer mystery. These things are actually picked up as bots per Amazon. So you want to focus on some keywords, but try to make it very authentic and specific and avoid anything that's been overused too much. And a good way to do that is to do keyword searches on Google, keyword searches on Amazon, and anything that kind of does sound cliche. We'll talk about cliches as we go, and you'll kind of pick up on things that are like, oh yeah, I've heard that a lot. So just try to avoid those, because unfortunately the algorithm for Amazon will also pick up on that, and they won't think that it's potentially a real person. Now, again, this could change in the next peer review journal that I read. But for now, that's what it states. It's kind of like coconut oil. Like, is it good for you or is it not? Anyways, moving on, let's dig a little deeper into blurbs. So where to even start? Try not to get overwhelmed. Go back to the basics that we talked about and write a pitch, or also known as a log line, and then build from there. Besides, a pitch is great. You always need to be able to fire away at people. And whenever you talk to somebody was asking me the other day what mine was about, and I have nailed my pitch, because the first time I was asked by family, I was kind of just, I don't know, I gave away too much. I was saying too little. Anyways, nail your pitch, because then people will just think you know what you're doing. So imagine describing the book to someone you don't know, and you have only a minute to do it. I sometimes voice record myself describing it and then write down what sounds best. And that way it's also less pressure to overthink. I've heard some people, a classmate of mine says that she does it in a different accent and records it, and it's like your brain isn't used to saying something, and so it picks up, whether it sounds good or not. So try those tricks out. But something that's very important is to keep the sentences straightforward, and please hide the thesaurus. So David Corey of Anatomy of a Pitch suggests carrying the pitch with verbs and nouns. I also recommend this with your blurbs too, because they hit us more centrally in the storytelling process. And I often tell clients to trim adverbs and adjectives because they do weaken the descriptor. Also give the reader an idea of the genre and era with the keywords. Some YA authors touch on the age of the MC, but if it's an adult book, it's not necessary. So a good example of this is Circe by Madeline Miller. I don't know if anybody's read her books. She's a great writer. In the house of Helios, god of the sun, and mightiest of the Titans, a daughter is born, but Circe is a strange child. not powerful like her father, nor viciously alluring like her mother. Turning to the world of mortals for companionship, she discovers that she does possess power, the power of witchcraft, which can transform rivals into monsters and menace the gods themselves. So you get a full idea of the era, the region, the main character, witchcraft, gives it all, and it's short. So some things to remember. You can add a line of a good review to the blurb. It really is like a good word of mouth. And I'll go more into comps later. Do mention if the book is part of a series. And also look at other blurbs to see what you like and don't like. Formatting choices can help the reader read it easier if it's broken down instead of just really dense block of text. I always say spacing is your friend. And also, if someone sees a long paragraph of a lot of words in a dense format, they're going to assume that the rest of your book is going to be like that too. So formatting is very important. Speaking of formatting, your formula is going to change slightly for the genre you write. Check out blurbs related to your genre and notice if there's a trend. So it's not staunch rule to stick to third person, but most people do. Again, it's subjective and it's stylistic. You do want to highlight the conflict, but don't give away any big reveals. Okay, let's look at some examples. You can add intrigue by asking questions or using hyperbole, which is an exaggerated statement that's not meant to be taken literally. An example of a question in Madame Tussauds, will Marie be able to hold on to both the love of her life and her friendship with the royal family as France approaches a civil war? So this is a good example of a successful question and intriguing blurb. I will say about 7 out of 10 of my books on my shelf don't have questions, so it's your call. If it's not cheesy, I kind of like them because I'm always asking in my head the answer to that question, and I want to find out. So an example of hyperbole, the age of innocence, torn between duty and passion, Archer struggles to make a decision that will either courageously define his life or mercilessly destroy it. And then there's one for The Great Gatsby too. A time when the New York Times noted gin was the national drink and sex the national obsession. Okay, if you don't want to convolute the language or the syntax, so just keep it simple. You want to disclose everything that happened in your character's world before they even start reading. Or sorry, you don't. Don't do that. And also spoilers. Big don't, even if you're tempted. Avoid too many characters. I always say this for first chapters too. It really bogs down the reader. And it kind of goes to the convoluted thing where it's too busy, too confusing. Next, keep your titles simple. I've seen, this is seriously an example, Senior Vice President Fulfillment Coordination for a Corporation so-and-so. And anyways, I've always used that as an example since then, because just make it a CEO, make it a boss, make her a boss. And then don't write about yourself in your blurb. Okay. For fans of, I like this. I think it targets your niche audience. There are a couple of rules though. So it could be a little bit limiting, and it could also bite you if it's not actually like the book that you're referencing it to. So just be really realistic about your comps. Also, like I tell all my query letter clients, because agents are way more staunch than your average reader, is mention what your book is like, but don't assume that it's going to be a unicorn. It's Harry Potter meets Twilight meets a twist of Hunger Games. It's always funny whenever I see something like that in examples of kind of what not to do from my professors in my creative writing class. Because I'm like, yeah, why would anybody do that? But then, I was probably doing that too when I first started out. So, and And I have a tendency to want to be like, oh, mine's a little bit like The Last Kingdom and Game of Thrones. And then I think about this example and I'm like, oh, yeah. Besides, those have been done. Let's focus on all of our unique stories. So writing accomplishments, I love these, love them. But as like a first-time writer, you might not have them. So I'll give you a tip. And you should never say this yourself. Another person should quote it for you, not by you. And I also recommend this for your comps because you don't want it to seem like you're piggybacking on somebody else's success. If you don't have a writing accolade, just say readers have compared this book to so-and-so. Okay, some cliches to avoid. How far would you go to save your family or yourself? I wish I had that movie theater guy voice right now. Can they catch the killer before their secrets are revealed? A gripping tale on the edge of your seat, a shocking twist you won't see coming in a world of. I actually don't mind some of these because like I do want to read a gripping tale, right? Like who doesn't? But I get it. They are overdone. So it's subjective, but yes, they're overdone. And in case I haven't mentioned this, I do have to say this really quick. I had to throw this on one of the slides, but I didn't want to make it a huge deal, is you have got to proofread, and better yet, hire an editor. So this is your one shot to sell the book. Make it tight. Okay, let's break down a best-selling blurb. So because I love female writers and protagonists with the historical fantasy aspect, let's dive into The Popular Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. So you have the basics here. You have Claire, who she is. This is how you write it out for yourself, not actually for the blurb. And then you take your primary conflict. She's trapped in the past. She must rely on a man who could tempt her away from her marriage oaths. I mean, honestly, there's so many things that happens to her. It's hard to kind of put what her primary conflict is, but at its core, that's basically it. Oh, and the fact that she could get stuck in a different century. Stakes, themes. So survival and fidelity, time travel, love against all odds. So write all this stuff out. Keywords, those are really important too. That's going to help you out whenever you do self-publish. So the blurb. Scottish Highlands, 1945. Claire Randall, a former British combat nurse, is just back from war and reunited with her husband on a second honeymoon when she walks through a standing stone in one of the ancient circles that dot the British Isles. So then she's thrust into Outlander. I'm not going to read the whole thing. And then there's Jamie. I think this is such a successful blurb because it gives the reader everything that it needs to be intriguing. But then whenever you actually open the book, you're just kind of thrown into even more crazy conflicts. However, I want to show you another example of something that's fewer words, same impact. This is one of the best examples from Stephanie Meyer's Twilight. About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how dominant that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. Very clever. And look at that format. Okay, so this is the fun part. Let's go dive into characters. Everybody raise your hand if you've used a character sketch, filled out some information about each character. You've pulled up a seat, you've poured them a drink, you really got to know them. Awesome. Thanks for that. So characters are the heart of fiction. I know you know this. I'm definitely not saying anything new, but what they do really becomes the story. And the plots are just chapters in their lives. All right. So if you want your reader to fall in love with your book, you need to create lives so interesting and so relatable. At some point, someone's got to be relatable, that they can't put your book down. Even catastrophic events won't move the reader if they aren't connected to your character. And this is really important if you start your stories in medias res, which is, in the action, in the middle, when something's about to happen. You still need to find a way to connect your character to the reader so that they care about the action that's going on. They need somebody to root for, which is my first tip. And then next, kill, or at the very least, mess with your darlings. No matter how badass your characters are, give them awful conflicts. The reader needs to see what they are made of. Make your character sympathetic. Perhaps they are in love or have lost a child or a spouse. Have something happen to them that they don't actually deserve. But don't make one character all good or all bad. If you've ever heard of a Mary Sue or a Gary Stu, that's what that is. Have a funny character. Honestly, we are so drawn to characters that make us laugh. It doesn't have to even be the main character, but throw in a secondary character that's got a sense of humor. Again, relatable, give them flaws, weaknesses, tics, something, we write characters that are little pieces of us. So that's going to be really relatable because you're a real person. And yeah, we have stories within ourselves. But do this for all your characters. Even the weirdos and the villains, because the more connections, more feelings for your story. Give your character power, especially your main character. All of the character building craft books for writing that I've read, they've all said nobody likes a wimpy main character. So you have to give them some kind of knowledge or some strength in something. They don't have to be physically strong. And then, of course, one of my favorites is show empathy. The reader must understand why a character behaves the way they do. Whether it's killing someone or stealing, connect the reason why to the reader. And then make the characters real, especially in sci-fi and fantasy, which I think a lot of people here are. So when the settings and characters are make-believe, the people need to be realistic. And even if they're green or blue, they must feel like someone you'd expect to meet, because it is very grounding for the reader. All right, so how do we get the readers to believe all those traits? So dialogue is a great place to start. No two characters should sound alike, and dialogue is like a whole nother section. And I really love to help people with dialogue because it's something that I thought I nailed whenever I was first going through writing school, and was like, I got this. All of my people sound different. Got it. And I kept getting feedback saying, yeah, but this isn't really dialogue. And I didn't understand what they were talking about. And then I realized there was subtext, and really, I was really bad at kind of chit chat. So they shouldn't sound alike with two characters. And honestly, if you do leave the tags out, you should be able to pick up which character is saying what. And then also feelings. Don't forget about all the characters' feelings. Even if it's first person, the feelings of others should come out in behavior, dialogue, the senses, and then give them all emotions. Villains, hoodlums, and yep, a-holes. They all have feelings too. And then never underestimate, like I said, the power of body language, subtext, and always the five senses. All right, so this is where you would compile basically everything that you need to know. But I just want to point out that if you notice when it's flipping through, physical descriptions, family, back history, personality, everything that you need to know, at the core of a story though, yes, you need all this stuff to develop the character arc, but you have got to establish what does your character want, which is his her external conflict, what does your character need, their internal, and what is stopping them from achieving these? Because that is the character arc to find out how they overcome that. So honestly, characters, this will help you create conflicts, which create chapters, and more importantly, it'll just bring your story to life. Okay, and so characterization is huge, but I wanted to touch on it a little bit just to give you some ideas and something to think about. Characterization and subtext is something that I feel like are often left out whenever we think about rewrites. And I'm always a big fan of making sure, like, those are the two post-it notes that I always have, is subtext and we'll always show versus tell a little bit too, but for the main part, characterization is just huge. So yeah, it has multiple jobs. It can show your character, because we do a lot of telling, and I know there's a place for show and there's a place for telling for a lot of things. But with characterization, there is a strength in showing a character, because it can do multiple things. It can show your setting. It can show you as your stylistic voice as a writer. And it's not top of the head descriptions. And I think that really elevates you as a writer. So if you notice, I have novice writer, top of the head, if you've ever heard of that. It's where we all began as writers, and where we still, this is how we write our first draft, top of the head. And then it's not until you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite that you start incorporating some of this more advanced writing, where you give the visuals. So don't worry about it in your first draft, write it down, top of the head, all the way through it if you have to. So yeah, describe who your characters are and what they look like by showing it instead of telling. So if you notice here, I've got, he was a big fella. That doesn't really tell us anything except for his size, which that is a general description. But if you were to say, when George came your way, you thought you were being run down by a truck. Now, as an editor, I don't like the fact that I have so many U's, but it's still showing that his size is threatening, and that is characterization. She was skinny. Instead, she always stood sideways so people could see how thin she was. That is telling us as a reader what kind of person she is, just a little glimpse of like maybe what her insecurities are or what she's really confident about. And then you want to avoid cliches like she carried herself like a queen. I don't hate that. I don't see it that often, but you could make it even more interesting and find your voice a little bit more as a writer. If you were to say something like how she actually walked, how her heels barely touched the ground, as if she'd never been barefoot, or something like that. So another novice writing is just the excess details and obvious descriptions. We do a lot of this. You know, men, we talk about their chiseled jawline, or women's cheekbones, or their almond-shaped eyes. And I say here that we usually do a nutty variation of hair color and eye colors. It's just, I don't know what that is, but we do it. So instead of kind of these obvious descriptions, which it's fine to give it, to say something, but try it through action. How is the character using her eyes? Does she have a nervous tick where she picks at her split ends or something like that? But always try to incorporate that through movement. Show characterization through physical descriptions, clothing, mannerisms, actions, and dialogue. And then, like I said, show versus tell is very similar here. You have direct and indirect. So everything doesn't have to be one or the other. Just blend it. Okay, so this is little giveaway time. If you will go to my Instagram page, follow me, connect with me. I would love to hear from you. Send me a DM. Click, the keyword is profile, and then send me your email address, and I will send you my character profile sheets that you can use for everything. And if you don't have Instagram, you can always email me at contact@argarrett.com. And then, yeah, but just connect with me either way. I'd love to hear what you're writing and see if, you know, we could be critique partners or just be a part of each other's life at some point. A reader. So anyways, this is the Q&A time. Hopefully I did it right on time, and I'm open. So why don't we, present tense. Okay. So this is such a good one. Do blurbs need to be written in present tense? So present tense is a little bit more attractive to the reader because they feel more drawn in. They're pulled in into something that's happening. So kind of like the third person, I would say that a lot of people do write in present tense, but it is subjective, it's stylistic choice. And I would recommend for you to check different blurbs in your genre and then go from there. Those are like a question. Also, I just wanted to say quickly that, oh, cool, I'm glad these questions are going in. So I did want to say that I do have a YouTube channel up. If you want to check out those flash edits, you can see some live editing that I do and get some tips and tricks from there too. Just some first chapter blurbs. I don't know if I have a query letter on there yet, but and then you can watch my funny how to find and reach your target audience. I learned the hard way on finding my critique partners. What about blurbs when there is multiple POVs? Oh, that's a great question. Oh man, this is such a big question because it depends on what you're writing, what your genre. If you're fantasy POVs, you're probably going to want to incorporate the main one. Usually we do have a main POV that takes a little bit more headspace than the rest. I would say focus on that, but always introduce no more than 3 characters. So if you have, like, let's say 8 POVs, which that would be crazy, and I commend you on that difficulty of writing, you just don't want to do that in your blurb because that will really bog down the reader. I hope I answered that enough. And if not, then we can always chat. Just reach out to me and I'll give you some more tips. I'm writing a YA science fantasy based on Earth. How much world building should I establish that this isn't space opera or typical dystopian? Ooh. Well, congrats on that. I'd love to hear more about that. I would say, so world building needs to be pretty limited in your blurb, always. Should I establish that this isn't space opera or typical dystopian? I wouldn't establish what it isn't. I would just focus on the originality of what it is. And then if there is any comps, that might be a really good idea to throw in what that comp would be. Hey, Peggy. I have a publisher who writes the blurbs in first person from the male perspective. I'm also Indy. What are your thoughts on first POV and male versus female POV blurb? Male versus female POV. Well, I wonder who the character is. So I guess it depends on the character. If it's if your main character is female, then I'd want to hear it from her. First person, I actually seeing this a lot more. It's kind of like how we're seeing present tense in writing. We're also seeing present tense, first person versus third person in blurbs. And I think it's just a new trend. I think it's a progression that's happening. I'm open to it. I'm all for it. I don't mind it. I do think that it would be weird to have a first person POV blurb if the story was in third person. So I think if the story's in first person, it's a little bit out there, but it's totally doable. Go for it if you want to. But I say about 80% of the blurbs that are out there are in third person just because it's kind of a tradition. I hope I answered that good for you. Let's see. But yeah, I do see first person. And then also if with the male versus female POVs, you know, I'm a big fan, a lot of editor in all of my editor groups, whenever this comes about these days, as far as should we say his or her, I think it's just universally okay to say they, and then that way you're not kind of pigeonholing any kind of readership into who you're talking about. Could be either or, if that makes sense. Yeah, any other questions? Hi, Wesley. Do we have to mention the existence of other POVs in the blurb and multiple? Can you tell me how many POVs that you do have? Because I'd love to know, kind of answered that before, but multiple POVs, you just really want to focus on the main one, incorporate, but like if you notice that Outlander one, you know, in Outlander, if I can remember correctly, it's been a long time since I read her books, but I'm pretty sure that Jamie had his own POV in the series. And so he is on the blurb. And I think that's really important. But we don't have Roger. We don't have, I think it's like Brianna. I think her name is, sorry, Outlander fans, but we don't have all of the characters. And I think that's wise. We have the main characters, go with that. But Wesley, let me know if you want to connect more. I'd love to help you out with your multiple POVs, because I think that is something that I probably should have touched on a little bit more now that I'm seeing all these questions. Hi, Courtney. Should you add anything at the bottom for content trigger warnings, i.e.? Yes, well, so technically it's not part of like your blurb pitch, but if the back of the book stuff that you're talking about, you know, you also want to add you want to always incorporate your author bio, your comps, your kind of selling tags, any accolades that you have, those can be included on the back of the book. And trigger warnings. So this is the thing. If you've noticed a lot of traditionally published books, they're usually not on the back of the blurbs. And I think nowadays it's starting to become a lot more awareness for trigger warnings. I think if you can pinpoint, like, let's say you have some grit or some trauma in your story, I think if you give glimpses of some of that grit, some of that theme, some of that tone, and maybe even some of that conflict without giving anything away, people that read it are going to be like, oh, okay, so this could carry some, you know, it's going to have some potential adult language. I know that the protagonist is going to be adult. I know that it's not YA because it's not a college or high school or middle grade theme. You need to portray all that in your blurb. And then another thing that I've seen a lot of publishers do is that they will add some trigger warnings on the inside in the first couple of pages. And I think that's always really smart to do so that you can give a reader a heads up and you're just protecting yourself too. I hope. And if you, Courtney, if you want to talk some more about that, connect. Hey, Alexa. Could you talk about putting the blurb and third omniscient while the manuscript is in first? Yeah, so a lot of it's kind of a traditional thing. Third, you know, the you know, you're giving omniscient, so you're the god like figure, a narrator that is telling, you know, the reader what they're going to expect. And I think there's so many books out there that have first person written and a third POV blurb. So you can't go wrong. And just keep in mind that you are, since it's omniscient, you are going to be the narrator. Keep it in present tense too, so that it's not too far from narration to reader, because remember that narration distance. So keep it present tense and do your third person omniscient from there. And that way that you can shorten that narrative distance a little bit and hook the reader. Peggy, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really sweet. Hi. Oh, people are you raising your hand because you're waving? What is your character? Okay. What if your character is high school age, but is in university? What if your character is high school age, but it's university? I'm not understanding that question fully. But you definitely want to, with any kind of audience, first you want to pick your target audience before you really even finish your book. You want to make sure you know who you're writing for, what your themes are going to be, and then that's going to help you with your tone, and that's going to carry over into your blurb as well. So if you have high school age, you don't have to say an age on your blurb, but you need to target that audience by making it pretty obvious, whether someone's in some kind of university, they're going back to school, they're in summer, summer off from school or something like that. And then that's going to help you target that audience. Oh, do you think, is it Annalie? It's really pretty. Do you think there is a certain amount of characters to focus on in a story before it's too much? Like, for example, some books focus on 2 characters and have the side characters. Others focus on 3, others 6, etc. Is there a point where it's too much, or in the opposite, too little? Ooh, good question. So this is so subjective. It is a author choice, reader choice, and everything in between. It's not an objective answer for that. There's no one answer. Some people really love sticking with one person. I really like, I kind of like one character, but it's very limiting. However, I really like a strong one character that I can get into their head. I feel like I'm in their body. I'm feeling their pain. But then again, I have some of my favorite books are multiple POVs, and I think it's so stylistically subjective, but I had a hard time. I love Game of Thrones. I'm a big fan of this just epic fantasy world. And I think that it's brilliant. I couldn't have written that. It would have bogged me down, but I also had a hard time kind of keeping up with the characters whenever I was reading the series. And I will give you a tip about characters, multiple POVs. Okay, make sure, of course, that you separate it with chapters. I don't even like, if you have a ton of characters, do not separate it by even a time lapse or just a break, a page break, a time break. I think you need, if you're going to have a ton of characters, I think they need to be fleshed out per chapter. Also give them different names and give them easy names, because I don't know if anybody here has actually read The Last Kingdom, but even though it's a first person POV, all of the names are like Ethelfled, Ethelstat, Ethelred, Ethel something, and it's a little bit maddening. So those are my tips for you on that. If you want to talk more about it, we can. And congrats, and just do what you feel good with. Do you have a good, okay, so do you have a good source for keywords to integrate into the text of the blurb? Oh yeah, but that really kind of depends on your genre. So I think kind of like what we were talking about with Outlander, time travel would be keywords, historical drama, romance, historical romance would be keywords to integrate. Yeah, and if it has any kind of historical reference to it, you want to try to throw that in. So if it's World War II or something like that, you want to add that. Oh, this is so great. Thank you. Not a question, just a comment. I got more out of this workshop on blurbs than any book I've ever read on them. Bless you and thank you. Oh my God. I love you. Like, honestly, that makes me so happy. Cheers to you. And honestly, please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you all. And I have you know, I do this because I love it and because I'm in it too, you know, so let's connect. Keywords, how many can I add within one space? I write contemporary romance and might write in space 1, contemporary, space 2, small town, etc. How can I change this up? Lori, why don't you reach out to me and we can, I need to know a little bit more about your story and I'll give you some keywords that you can add in there. And yeah, just reach out to me, either Instagram or contact@argarrett.com and let me know a little bit more about your story and then I'll give you some keywords. Oh, thanks for the comment, Diane. I appreciate you. Very good information. Thank you. Well, you are welcome. Thank you. Good luck to you. Is the age of the characters the main difference between a book being YA or not? Yes. So you definitely need to pinpoint your audience, and every comp that you do and every marketing ploy, what do I say? Marketing, basically your target audience. You need to find that out. You need to find which shelf your book belongs on, and then you're going to want to make that your comp shelf. So it's really important to establish that. It's important to establish that for the reader, because a lot of people, you know, they like to stay in their, some people like to just stay in their genre lane, and they like strict YAs, they like certain YAs, they like academia YAs, you know, where it's, and so where it's either high school or, you know, not too adult, new adult kind of stuff, and they like kind of a younger adult. So definitely make that apparent, know your target audience. Hey, Gareth. I guess I know I do have a question. 3 elders, love some elders. I've got some elders too. So Gareth has 3 elders, and I have no clue if I write them in each chapter in a chapter of their own or a chapter with all 3. Well, that's a broad question, because do these elders, I mean, are they together? Or are they in different continents? Are they, if they work together, I like to see characters in, you know, together in chapters, but one being the point of view and then the other, because it's always interesting to see different point of view of characters that are in scenes together, because you don't know, like, you know, what exactly how they might be feeling or where their stance on things might go. I kind of want to know more about your story, Gareth. Love some elders, but I think it's always a good idea to incorporate. And yes, have them on chapters of their own. I'm not a big fan of multiple POVs, just splitting up with time breaks. I think that you need full chapters, maybe even a name of a chapter. I know it's not maybe popular, but I appreciate it whenever I'm flipping into a chapter and I know who I'm about to get. So I hope that helps, and thanks for that. Do you have any top tips for romance fantasy blurbs? Oh, Coral, hi. Can you contact me? Because I know we're running out of time, and I'd like to know a little bit more about your romance fantasy, and if it's an adult, if it's YA, if it's new adult, or if I had some more information about your romance fantasy blurbs, then I can kind of help you a little bit more specific. But find your community, find your audience, find your comps, and read the back of your favorite romance fantasy blurbs, because honestly, that's going to give you a lot of great information about what you like, what you don't like. And it's not piggybacking. It's like going to an art museum and you're like, oh, I don't really like that, or oh, I could do that. Helena, hi. My book is about characters between 19 and 30s. The closest comp is Gossip Girl, which is young and young adult, but my book isn't young adult. Okay, well, you need to, if you have established your target audience, and so if your comp is Gossip Girl, which is YA, I think you need to realign and think more about who you've written the book for. And if your comp is truly YA, that's whenever you have to kind of backpedal a little bit and either change your characters' ages, change some of the themes. And you know, that's my biggest suggestion there. You're gonna have to change either ages or themes, but you're gonna have to figure out, because if your comps and your genre bookshelf that you feel like you've really written it for aren't matching up, then you need to reevaluate. And if you have any questions, reach out, I'll help you. Nowadays, we see less and less blurbs somehow on book. A lot of reader now choose based on the cover, for example, or other person opinion. Do you think then that now it's less important to have blurbs? I always read a blurb. I always read a blurb. And I'm even so much as I read a couple of first sentences of the chapter, but the blurb hooks me every time. I think that's because I need to see for myself how I feel whenever I read somebody's written words and how their story through their writing is going to connect with me. And so it's very important for me to read the blurb. I do. And also I know all of us have been there to where we have a recommendation from somebody and we're a little bit disappointed, or it really is great. And we're like, yay. But I just, with a grain of salt, I take people's word of mouth, and I love it. And I want recommendations, but I gotta feel something. Hope that makes sense and answers your question. Well, hey, Princess, I'm writing a book about twins based on a popular movie. I want to know more about this. They face off with their relatives from the popular movie. How can I write it without red flagging my book? Okay, I need to know way more information than this because it's already intriguing me and I want to help you out with that, but I need more info. Annie. Hi, Annie. Okay, you mentioned that we should say if it is a series or not, but what if if it's a standalone book that are all in the same world, but want them to be able to be read out of order? Not sure how to go about marketing it. So it's same world, standalone. I would still mention it, because even though it's kind of like the question that I got for trigger warnings or comps, or if you're a fan of so-and-so book, those kind of things are marketing ploys. And so I don't see any shame in throwing out another gem that you have written. And besides, if it's the same world, then people are going to be interested in it. So yeah, go for it, Annie. Hi, Sai. Do you offer more workshops on your own or have a book on the blurbs? Well, I do have a blurb formula that I send out to all my clients whenever I blurb edit them, so that they can just take with all their future blurbs. I'm creating workshops on my website. Just kind of check in argarrett.com. They're going to be rolling out soon for characters, but for blurbs, all I have is my blurb sheet and the formula. But why don't you connect with me and I'll help you out. Princess, hi again. Ooh, descendants of the Sanderson sisters. Okay, you have got to reach out to me because there's too much to unload there, but I would love to help you out. And yeah, don't red flag your book. You don't want to give too much away to your reader, you know. But yeah, definitely. We're just about out of time. Is there any last ones before we go? Can I get just a little hand wave? Because I just want to say thank you. And I really appreciate everybody for being here. Honestly, this was wonderful. Thanks for connecting. Bye.